Chapter 27 The Great Palace. Link had no idea what to expect as he passed the entrance and made his way down into the Great Palace, where the walls, floor, and ceiling were still consistently made of gold, but since this was to be the last leg of his journey, he wasn't about to let any traps or monsters stand in his way. It was time, after what felt like years, to reclaim the Triforce of Courage, wake the original Princess Zelda from her cursed sleep, and make Hyrule whole again. However, when he reached the bottom of the stairs and drew his silver sword for battle with the worst monsters that the darker parts of the kingdom had to offer, he entered the first hall to find that it was empty. Fully furnished and immaculately clean, with drapes and banners of the old Hyrule families proudly on display, and the light from wall-mounted torches reflecting off the gold structure, the great palace was truly a wonder to behold. But it was so totally empty that it bothered the Lord Sheriff even more than a room full of enemies. "Hello?" he called, hearing his own voice echo several times. "I've come for the Triforce." He figured that if legions of horrific monsters were waiting to ambush him anyway, he might as well call them out into the open, but even after alerting the whole palace to his presence, nothing moved or made a sound. Link was also getting nowhere by just staying where he was, so he continued on, trying, quite unsuccessfully, to silence the sound of his footsteps as he came to a staircase. Now that he thought about it, this part of the palace looked a lot like the North Palace did, so maybe the more important things were stored upstairs. The echoes were so incredibly loud and repeated as he made his way upward, that the Lord Sheriff was starting to understand why the palace had been originally abandoned, and this made him thankful for each time that he got to walk over a throw rug. The temporary halt to the echoes was the finest silence that Link had ever heard, causing him to follow the rug through the door into a nearby chamber. A chamber with a figure so interesting that it caused him to stop in his tracks. No, the Triforce of Courage wasn't there, but there were huge, painted portraits hung up and spaced out along the room's four walls, beginning with one that looked incredibly familiar when he took a closer look. Set against the backdrop of a high mountain fortress, Link could see the clearly drawn images of his younger self, locked in battle with Ganondorf, while Facade defended himself against Darknut with his shield. The others were there as well. Aghanim was in the air, setting fire to Lord Vyre as they fought, while Miranda, in her guise as Blind the Master Thief, engaged the boomerang-throwing Goria, all while the elderly Impa and captured Zelda huddled together in the center with the red and green Triforces. This was an incredible painting of their adventure 5 years ago, but he couldn't help but wonder who had painted it, especially since Singh had told him that no one had been inside in a very long time. Next to that one was an even more disturbing portrait. Well, disturbing but beautiful, as it showed another Triforce, a blue one this time, hovering over the sleeping form of the original Princess Zelda. In front of this backdrop was Link, as he currently was, ready to engage an unseen enemy with his sword, while his other arm embraced Singh lovingly. Facade and Aghanim were there again, this time back to back while surrounded by 3 figures that the Lord Sheriff didn't recognize, except for Karok. The other 2 were a big man with a spiked helmet, and someone who looked like Darknut. Miranda and Zelda were there, but not in disguise this time, as they fought off a pair of twin warriors who looked a bit like skeletons, and even the newly transformed Impa was in the corner, floating with her new fairy wings, as if watching the whole scene unfold. It was as if someone had been watching all of his trials and battles, but then again, the paint on these portraits was very old, almost to the point of flaking off. There were so many of these paintings stretching across the walls of the rooms that Link only decided to look at one more before moving on. The next one down the line. This one was set against the backdrop of a darkened room, where a large golden statue of 3 connected, maybe Triforces, sat on top of an altar. Half of the background was a brightly lit forest with flowers and trees, while the other was shadowy with bare branches and thorns, while someone who looked like a really angry Aghanim glared down at the whole scene. At the center, though, were 2 figures. One was a terrifying-looking sort of warthog creature who carried a pitchfork, and the other was a girl. She was younger and slender with brown hair, wearing a green outfit similar to the one that Link favored, and ready to fight off the monster with a sword. No, not just any sword, as he looked closer. The Master Sword. But why did Aghanim look so angry in this one? And what was going on with the darkness and light?
"Like the paintings, do you?" a voice asked, making the Lord Sheriff jump. "It warms my heart to see a young man who makes time for such things."
Where there had been no signs of life within the palace only moments ago, now there was a frail-looking form of an old man wearing a hood and cloak similar to the one that Sing wore. He coughed a little while taking his own quick look at the portraits. He did not seem threatening in the slightest, but from everything that Link had seen in his life, he knew better than to trust what he saw in front of himself. "Who are you?" he asked, keeping a hand on his sheathed sword. "Are you the guardian of the Triforce?"
"What? Oh, yes, sure. The Triforce. Maybe a few 100 years ago," the old man replied. "I believe you know my daughter, although the years have been far kinder to Sing than they have to me. Now, we mustn't spend all day gawking at the old paintings. Come along, young man, we've things to do."
The old man motioned for Link to follow, and although watching out for traps as best he could, there really didn't seem to be much choice but to go along for now. As they walked back down the stairs and down the corridor, the old man related some of the history of this place, saying that it had once been the capital of a great kingdom that had existed before it had been split into regions like Hyrule and Arcadia and such. In those days, the great king held absolute domain, but like all great things, they became undone with greed and desire over time. "This place isn't what I expected," the Lord Sheriff commented as they passed through another beautifully decorated room. "From all the trials that Sing put me through, I thought the Great Palace was going to be a gauntlet of traps and monsters."
"Oh, it was, boy, it once was," the old man replied. "This place was once a death trap, furnished by the King of Hyrule with the deadliest traps and monsters in the land, to protect the Triforce of Courage from those deemed unworthy. Oh, my boy, you should have seen the Thunderbird. It was magnificent, but then Sing added her curse to the mix, and with the barrier up, all of the creatures eventually died."
Apparently he, and the monsters, as well as several workmen who were fixing the place up, had been trapped inside when his daughter's curse took effect, and once the people and creatures were gone, he disarmed the traps, worried that he would eventually forget where they all were and set one off himself. With hundreds of years passing with no one being able to enter the Great Palace, the old man had decided to make the best of things, since it was his home now, but of course, just after getting things the way he liked it, someone just had to walk in. "So, aside from your daughter's curse," Link asked as they started down another staircase, "the Triforce of Courage is just kind of sitting down here, unguarded."
"Oh, don't be a fool, boy," the old man laughed, nearly slipping on the stairs. "Even without the monsters, the traps, or my powers being what they used to be, I could lead you right to that ridiculous blue pyramid, and you'd never find it without my help. Not in a million years. Oh, and since we have a ways to walk, boy, what exactly are your intentions with my daughter?"
Now this question had caught him off guard, although the Lord Sheriff admitted to having fallen in love with Sing, while almost walking into a pillar when the old man took a sharp turn down another corridor into a lower level. What Link wanted was to be able to spend time with the dark-haired magician that didn't involve monsters or saving the kingdom. But then the old man suddenly stopped walking in the center of one of the largest, most elaborate chambers that they had been through so far.
"Boy, I need to ask you something," he said, coughing while leaning heavily on his cane. "Were you born a blithering idiot, or was it a gradual transition? You're letting a stranger lead you through the Great Palace, and you're so wrapped up in a girl that I bet you haven't even been paying attention to how far we've gone, what part of the palace we've gone into, or the way back."
Link was about to say something back to this, but then he realized that the old man was right. He hadn't been paying attention at all, but he couldn't see or feel any danger in the surrounding area. Everything there was just as elegant and calm as the rest of the palace. But then the torches on the walls flickered before going out for a moment, and something had changed in the room during that instant of darkness. Just for a second, there had been bars blocking the exits, all of the furniture was gone, as was the old man, and there was something moving. But then the light returned and everything was normal again. "What was that?" Link exclaimed, looking around and drawing his sword. Everything was dark and... what was that?
"I was telling the truth that there are no traps or monsters," the old man continued. "But I lied about my magic. It's just as strong as ever, and I was able to preserve a few memories, shadows, if you will, but separate from my comfortable home. Unfortunately, my spell doesn't keep them separate from you, though. So get ready, boy, because things in the light are not the same in the dark."
With that, all the torches went out, leaving the Lord Sheriff in the same room, but with the bars back over the doors, and just enough of an ambient purplish-blue glow for him to see that he was no longer alone. The old man was gone, but in his place was a creature. A big, towering creature with the head of a lion and great big wings on its back that spread out as it rose up into the air.